Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. I never thought my marriage would end like this. For 8 years, Natalie and I built a life together. Not extravagant, but steady and happy. At least, I thought we were happy. Then she met Evelyn. I remember the first time she mentioned her. It was a Thursday evening, and we were having dinner like usual. "I made a new friend today," Natalie said, twirling her fork in her pasta. "Yeah? Who?" I asked, sipping my drink. "Her name's Evelyn. She just moved to Brighton. We met at the bookstore downtown." "Nice," I said, not thinking much of it. Everyone needs friends, right? At first, it was just casual, two women bonding over books and coffee. But slowly, something changed. Natalie started spending more time with Evelyn. What began as occasional lunches turned into late-night outings. I didn't realize at the time that Evelyn had been through 3 failed relationships, all tainted by lies and betrayal. I didn't know how much her influence would seep into my marriage. But looking back, that was the beginning of the end. At home, Natalie became different. She stopped waiting for me to get home for dinner. The house, once a warm, shared space, became cluttered, unfamiliar. She seemed distant, uninterested in the small routines that made up our life together. I told myself it was just a phase. Everyone needs a break sometimes, right? But deep down, I knew something was off. Then one night, I came home late from work to find our house in chaos. Laundry strewn across the furniture, dishes piling up in the sink. Natalie was sitting on the couch, painting her nails, completely unbothered by the mess. "Rough day?" I asked, hoping she'd look up and see the frustration on my face. She didn't. "Not really." I sighed. "Yeah, work was crazy. I thought maybe we could have dinner together." She finally glanced up, blowing on her nails. "I already ate with Evelyn." That was becoming a pattern. Evelyn had taken my place. Another night, I found Natalie standing in front of the mirror, adjusting a tight dress, when I hadn't seen her wear in years. "Going somewhere?" I asked. She barely looked at me. "Out with Evelyn." Again, I clenched my jaw. "Natalie, you've been going out every night. What's going on with you?" She turned, annoyance flashing in her eyes. "I don't see the problem, Daniel." I folded my arms. "The problem is that you're acting like a completely different person. You used to care about being home. About us." She let out a bitter laugh. "Maybe I needed a change. Maybe I was tired of being stuck in the same routine every single day." Evelyn made me realize something. I deserve to have fun too. I exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. "I never stopped you from having fun, but this is different. You're shutting me out. Maybe I just don't want to be the same person anymore." I looked at her, standing there, dressed up like she was someone I didn't recognize. And for the first time, I felt like I had already lost her. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my marriage had already ended. I just hadn't realized it yet. The days blurred into weeks, and the distance between us widened like a canyon. Natalie continued her late nights, her unexplained outings. She'd leave before I got home from work and return long after I had gone to bed. When she was home, it was as if she was just passing through, a stranger living in the same space. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself that every relationship goes through rough patches, that maybe this was just her way of finding herself again. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, I stayed up waiting for her. The clock read 1:47 a.m. when I heard the front door creak open. She tiptoed inside, her heels clicking against the floor. Her makeup was smudged, her hair messy. She smelled like perfume, one that wasn't hers. "Where have you been?" My voice was calm, but my hands clenched into fists at my sides. She paused, then casually slipped off her shoes. "Out. Out where?" She sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "At a bar with Evelyn." I stood up from the couch. "Every night, Natalie? This isn't just grabbing a drink with a friend. You're never here anymore. And when you are, you barely look at me." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Daniel, do you hear yourself? I'm just living my life. Why are you acting like I'm doing something wrong?" "Because you are." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You just don't get it." "No, I don't," I snapped. "I don't understand why you've suddenly stopped caring. I don't understand why the woman I married is acting like she doesn't want to be here anymore." She shook her head, brushing past me. "I'm too tired for this." And just like that, the conversation was over. She disappeared into our bedroom, shutting the door behind her. I stood there, staring at the closed door, feeling completely helpless. The next morning, she was already gone when I woke up. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. The nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't let up. At lunch, I met up with my friend Chris, a guy who had been in my life long before Natalie ever was. He could tell something was off before I even said a word. "What's going on, man?" he asked as we sat at a small cafe near my office. I hesitated before answering. "It's Natalie. She's different." Chris leaned back in his chair. "Different how?" I ran a hand through my hair. "She's always out with this new friend, Evelyn. It's like she's not even my wife anymore. She barely speaks to me. She's never home. And when she is, it's like I'm not even there." Chris studied me for a moment before speaking. "Look, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but are you sure it's just Evelyn?" His words hit me like a brick. I had considered it, of course I had, but I didn't want to believe it. "I don't know," I admitted, "but something feels off." Chris sighed. "You need to find out, Daniel. You can't just sit around waiting for answers that may never come." That night, I decided to stop pretending. I had to know. When Natalie left for another girl's night, I followed her. I stayed far enough behind so she wouldn't notice, my heart pounding as I watched her pull into a dimly lit bar across town. I parked a block away and walked up cautiously, keeping my distance. Through the large windows, I spotted her immediately, but she wasn't alone. Sitting next to her was a man I had never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with his arm draped casually around her shoulders. And across from them, sipping a drink with a knowing smirk, was Evelyn. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Natalie laughed at something the man said, leaning into him, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. She looked happy, carefree, like she wasn't married, like I didn't exist. My hands curled into fists, but I didn't storm inside. I just stood there, watching the woman I loved betray me in real time. And in that moment, I knew I was losing her. Maybe I already had. The moment I saw her with him, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was certainty. The way she laughed so freely, the way her body leaned toward him, the way his fingers brushed against her arm without hesitation. They weren't two people having an innocent conversation. They were familiar, comfortable, intimate. I stood frozen outside the bar, my heart hammering against my ribs. My body wanted to storm in, to demand an explanation, to make a scene. But my mind told me something different. If I confronted her now, she would lie. She would make excuses. She would twist the truth. No, I needed more than just what I saw. I forced myself to turn away and walk to my car. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. A million emotions surged through me. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But beneath it all, there was a cold, hard determination forming. I wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. That night, I waited. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I simply waited. At 12:47 a.m., she finally walked through the door. The moment she entered, I smelled the alcohol on her breath, the faint trace of cologne that didn't belong to me. She paused when she saw me sitting on the couch, but quickly recovered, forcing a casual smile. "Hey," she said, kicking off her heels. "You're still up?" I studied her, my expression unreadable. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." She ran a hand through her hair. "I told you I was out with Evelyn." A test. She was giving me the same lie again, waiting to see if I would swallow it like I always had. I simply nodded. "Did you have fun?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Yeah, just a normal girl's night." Normal. I wondered if she felt even the slightest bit of guilt as she stood there lying to my face. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to throw everything I saw in her face right then and there. But I held back. This wasn't the time. Instead, I stood up, walked past her, and muttered, "Glad you had fun." And for the first time, I saw hesitation in her expression, like she knew something was off, like she could sense that I was no longer the oblivious husband she had counted on. I went to bed without another word. The next morning, I woke up early. Natalie was still asleep, tangled in the sheets, her face peaceful. It was almost ironic. While I had spent the night wrestling with my thoughts, she had slept soundly. I watched her for a moment before quietly slipping out of bed. I needed answers. and I knew exactly where to find them. Her phone was on the nightstand. I had never invaded her privacy before. I had always believed that trust was the foundation of our marriage. But trust was a two-way street. And right now, I needed the truth more than I needed my pride. I picked up her phone, my hands slightly shaking as I unlocked it. The first thing I checked was her messages with Evelyn. Immediately, I saw the cracks in her story. Evelyn asterisk, he still doesn't suspect anything? Natalie asterisk, asterisk no. He's too trusting, asterisk. I felt my stomach twist. Lies. All of it. She had been lying straight to my face, using her best friend as an alibi. I scrolled further, and that's when I saw his name. Elliot. I opened their conversation, my breath catching in my throat. Elliot asterisk, can't wait to see you tonight. Natalie asterisk, asterisk me too. Miss you already, asterisk. There were photos, smiling selfies, a reservation confirmation for a hotel 2 weeks ago, messages about how I was too busy with work to even notice. Each word I read felt like a fresh wound, cutting deeper and deeper. I had been so blind, so trusting. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the lump in my throat. My hands were shaking now, a mix of fury and heartbreak surging through me. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I had all the proof I needed. Now, it was time to hear the truth from her lips. I sat on the edge of the bed, still holding her phone, when she finally stirred. She blinked sleepily, stretching before her gaze landed on me. And then, almost instinctively, her eyes darted to the phone in my hands. She froze. For the first time in months, I saw something real on her face. Not indifference, not irritation, fear. You left your phone unlocked, I said, my voice eerily calm. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I tossed the phone onto the bed beside her. Who is Elliot? Her face turned pale. Daniel, don't insult me by lying again. My voice was sharper now, my pulse hammering. I saw the messages, the pictures, the hotel. She inhaled sharply, her hands trembling as she clutched the sheets. I stood up, shaking my head. How long? Her lip quivered. Daniel. Asterisk how long, Natalie? Asterisk. Tears welled in her eyes. 6 months. A bitter laugh escaped me. 6 months. Half a year. I ran a hand through my hair, letting the weight of it all settle. How long were you planning on lying to me? She wiped at her face, but the tears kept falling. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a hollow laugh. That's the thing, Natalie. You did. You didn't just hurt me. You betrayed everything we had. Her shoulders shook as she whispered. I felt trapped, Daniel. I didn't know who I was anymore. I was scared. Scared of what? I demanded. Her voice cracked. Scared that maybe we weren't meant to be anymore. The words shattered something inside me. I stared at her, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had loved through everything, and realized she wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never had been. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I exhaled, my voice quiet but firm. I deserved better than this. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't reach for her. I didn't try to comfort her, because this time I was the one walking away. And in that moment, I knew this was the beginning of the end. I packed a bag that same night, not because I had nowhere else to go, not because I needed space to think, but because I couldn't bear to spend another second in the same house with her. Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with red-rimmed eyes. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her tears weaken me. You're really leaving? She asked, her voice small. I zipped my duffel bag shut and slung it over my shoulder. What do you expect me to do, Natalie? She swallowed hard. We could talk about this. There's nothing left to talk about. My voice was flat, emotionless. I was past the point of anger now. There was only exhaustion. She wiped at her face, her fingers trembling. I never wanted to hurt you, Daniel. I let out a hollow laugh. Well, congratulations. You did anyway. I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. And Natalie didn't try to stop me. That, more than anything, told me all I needed to know. I checked into a hotel that night. The air in the room smelled sterile, unfamiliar. The bed was too crisp, too neatly made. Everything felt wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The silence pressed in on me. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly through my contacts. There were numbers I could call, friends, family, but I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? Asterisk K, my wife has been cheating on me for 6 months, and I just walked out on my marriage. What's new with you? Asterisk. I set the phone down and leaned forward, pressing my hands to my face. I had imagined a lot of scenarios for my life. This wasn't one of them. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache. I had barely slept. My mind kept replaying everything. Her lies, the messages, the way her face had crumbled when I confronted her. I should have felt victorious. I had caught her. I had walked away with my dignity intact. But there was no satisfaction in any of it. Just a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. By noon, I forced myself out of the hotel room. I needed fresh air. I ended up at a small coffee shop, staring blankly into a cup of black coffee that I barely touched. Around me, people laughed, couples held hands. Life went on as if my world hadn't just been torn apart. I checked my phone. A single text from Natalie. Natalie asterisk, I miss you. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. She missed me. As if that changed anything. As if those 3 words could undo the betrayal. I didn't respond. Instead, I found myself typing something else. A name I hadn't searched in years. Elliot Carter. Her lover. I had spent the last 6 months blind to what was happening right in front of me. That was over. I wasn't going to be the clueless husband anymore. I found his profile easily. His face was smug, self-assured. A man who had no problem taking what wasn't his. I gritted my teeth, my fingers clenching around my phone. I needed to know everything about him. And I needed to decide just how far I was willing to go to make sure he regretted ever touching my wife. I spent the next few days in limbo. Natalie texted me, called me, left voicemails. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on Elliot. I learned that he was a corporate lawyer, well-connected, well-respected. He had a fiancée. The irony of it made me laugh bitterly. He had someone waiting for him at home while he spent his nights with my wife. I considered reaching out to his fiancée, exposing him, blowing his world apart the way he had blown up mine. But deep down, I knew revenge wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't erase the betrayal. It wouldn't undo the past. I had to think about my future, and that future didn't include Natalie. By the end of the week, I was done waiting. I drove back to the house, my heart heavy, but my mind made up. When I walked through the door, Natalie was sitting on the couch, her eyes puffy, her hands wrapped around mug. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. She jumped to her feet the moment she saw me. Daniel, I'm filing for divorce, I said, cutting her off. Her face crumpled. Please, can't we try? Try what? I asked, my voice sharp. Pretend this never happened? Pretend I don't see his face every time I look at you. She swallowed, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't love him. I let out a bitter laugh. Then why did you choose him? Silence. Because we both knew the answer. She had already made her choice. I was just making mine now. By the time I walked out of the house that day, I knew it was over. Truly, finally over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The weeks following my decision were a blur of paperwork, sleepless nights, and long stretches of silence. It was like a slow-motion car crash that I couldn't escape, no matter how fast I tried to run. Natalie's calls and texts became desperate, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. There was nothing left to say. I focused on the divorce. The papers were filed quickly. The proceedings moved along with a cold efficiency that made me feel like nothing more than a spectator in my own life. The house, once a place of shared memories, now felt empty. The walls seemed to close in on me. I didn't care anymore. I was numb. Even with all the paperwork moving forward, there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: the emotional toll it would take on me. I had always thought of myself as someone who could compartmentalize, someone who could handle whatever life threw at him. But this was different. Every time I signed a document, every time I faced a judge or a lawyer, I was reminded of everything I'd lost. Natalie's face, her eyes full of regret and apology, kept flashing in my mind. I could still hear her voice saying she didn't love Elliot. But I knew that was a lie, because love wasn't something you just forgot about, not like that. Not when you've been married to someone for years. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of a life we had built together. The foundation we had spent so many years laying was now shattered. Nothing was going to fix that. The final court date arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with my head held high. I had come a long way since that first night, since the night I caught them together. I had cried, yes. I had screamed, and I had questioned myself over and over again. But today I was done with the past. Natalie was already there when I arrived. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying. She looked fragile, but there was something different about her now, a sense of defeat that hadn't been there before. She glanced up at me as I walked past, but I didn't acknowledge her. The lawyer called us to the front, and the proceedings began. The words were familiar: custody arrangements, division of assets, alimony, but they felt hollow, like I was listening to someone else's life, not my own. Finally, it was over. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, our marriage was officially over. There were no dramatic scenes, no confrontations, just a simple, clean break. And as the gavel came down, I felt nothing. It was as though I'd been holding my breath for months, and now, finally, I could exhale. I moved out of the house shortly after. The furniture was gone, the rooms stripped bare, and the memories began to fade. I found a small apartment not too far from my old home, and it was perfect for what I needed: space. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I threw myself into work, reconnecting with old friends, and even started doing things I hadn't done in years: hiking, going to the gym, reading for pleasure. It felt like I was rediscovering myself, the person I had forgotten when I'd been so consumed by the idea of a perfect marriage. And slowly, the hurt started to fade. The anger, the sense of betrayal, it all started to lose its grip on me. I wasn't completely free of it, not yet, but the weight was lifting. Then, about a month after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Natalie again. I hadn't expected it, and honestly, I wasn't sure how I would feel if I saw her again. But there she was, standing in front of the grocery store, looking more put together than she had in months. She froze when she saw me, her face flushing. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't expect to see you here." I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Yeah, well, life doesn't always go as planned." She nodded, looking away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. There was something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or regret, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "I've been thinking about you," she said quietly. "About everything. The divorce, what happened between us. I regret it, Daniel. I do. I made a huge mistake." I studied her face, and for the first time, I felt pity, not anger. "I'm sorry, Natalie," I said, my voice low, "but I've moved on. I can't go back." Her shoulders slumped, the weight of my words sinking in. She opened her mouth as if to say something else, but then she closed it again, nodding. "I understand," she whispered, and with that, she turned and walked away. As I stood there, watching her leave, I realized that I had finally let go. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just free. Free of her. Free of the life I had once thought was everything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't need her. I didn't need the past. I was moving forward, and there was a whole world waiting for me. Maybe someday, I'd be ready for love again. But for now, I was content with who I was becoming. And that was enough.